The Illuminati's time in the MCU hopefully isn't done yet, as the group has so much potential. I mean, they're some of the strongest, smartest heroes around, and only did poorly in live action because they were up against a reality-manipulating former Avenger with god-tier abilities. I mean, anyone would have suffered the same fate, right? Anyways, the Illuminati is an incredibly secretive group filled with secret members, so of course they all have secret powers.
That's better.
Here's a list of hidden abilities that Marvel's Illuminati have in their back pocket. Like, did you know Professor X knows martial arts? Or that Reed Richards has an elastic brain? I never would have guessed. Let's get into it right now. I'm going to be jumping around between Illuminati members in the comics and Illuminati members in the MCU, but I wanted to start with some overlapping characters. So of course I wanted to begin with Reed Richards, aka Mr. Fantastic, aka the smartest man in the universe, aka hey look, it's John Krasinski.
Mind control. You can't be serious.
I've always liked how Mr. Fantastic has basically two superpowers. Of course, he's the incredibly stretchy man, which makes him practically invulnerable, and an underrated hero in terms of pure power.
Ben must be at it again.
But also, his big brain makes him one of the most valuable minds in whatever universe he's in. And usually you can separate Reed Richards, the genius, and Mr. Fantastic, the superhero. But this somewhat hidden ability blends the best of both worlds together. Reed can stretch his body into all sorts of zany shapes and sizes, but people don't really realize that he can also stretch his insides. And no, I'm not just talking about making his stomach 10 times bigger so he can finish that massive ice cream sundae by himself, although that is a good idea. But I'm more talking about his elastic brain. Reed's already smart on his own, but he can actually make himself smarter by stretching and enlarging his brain to help solve problems. Like, if he needs to become an expert in a certain language, he can enlarge that part of his brain while shrinking some other parts in order to operate at max efficiency. That's overall pretty cool. Now, maybe if the MCU version of Reed Richards would have done this, he would have known that confronting the reality-bending Scarlet Witch was a bad idea. It was a real treat seeing Black Bolt in the Illuminati and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. He's a team staple, but after the disastrous attempt by Marvel to bring the Inhumans to the small screen, I thought the MCU would sidestep Blackagar Boltagon completely to just avoid any unpleasant memories. But nope, there Black Bolt was, complete with the little fork on his head. Isn't it just awesome when live-action superhero movies just adapt the comic costumes accurately? Sure, it's goofy, but it's a fun goofy for sure. Anyways, Black Bolt is mainly defined by his ability to destroy everything around him with just, as Krasinski worded it, a whisper from his mouth. Strange wording, I know, that was only there to set up the next punchline, but I guess that doesn't matter because Black Bolt's voice is just all-powerful. It also makes him too overpowered because honestly, there didn't seem like a threat that the team would face that couldn't be beaten by Black Bolt speaking. But Blackagar Boltagon has a whole other skill set that isn't highlighted as much. And one of my favorites is his ability to sense danger. I find it very similar to Peter Parker's Spidey sense, where Black Bolt can use a sixth sense to understand if there's a threat nearby. In the same vein as this, Black Bolt has something called stress point detection, which he can use to sense weaknesses. Like, one time he was chained up and he used this ability to detect the weakest point in the chain and break it. That's pretty cool. Professor X is one of the most powerful mutants around. His genius-level intellect and telepathic powers makes him an excellent hero, a teacher, and probably the person you want most on your team if you were playing charades or taboo or something. He'd just read your mind and then you win.
Sorry, Eric, not today.
Anyways, there's one interesting power that's used a few times in the comics, but hasn't exactly been utilized the best in live action. I'm talking about Professor X's mind transferral ability. This allows him to transport his consciousness into another being if his body somehow fails him. This has both helped and hindered him a lot in the comics, and it probably would have helped a lot in his fight against Wanda in the Multiverse of Madness. But whenever I think about this power, I think about the laughable X-Men The Last Stand post-credit scene where it's revealed that before Charles was obliterated by the Dark Phoenix, his mind went into the body of a coma patient.
Hello, Moira.
Of course, then the X-Men franchise really got confusing, so they just ignored that in later movies. Man, now I sort of wish that the post-credit scene of Multiverse of Madness had Professor X's consciousness jump into the body of Pizza Papa and follow his new adventures in that universe. Hey, a guy can dream, right?
Good news.
There's something really awesome sounding about universal awareness. It could allow one to achieve an understanding of all his surroundings that goes beyond just the 5 normal senses. Doctor Strange has on occasion shown to be proficient at this and mainly just needs some meditation and time in order to tap into this fun ability. I wanted to bring this up because there's 2 instances in the MCU that I wanted to mention. The first is Doctor Strange using the Eye of Agamotto in Infinity War to see all those different futures and possibilities. Are you telling me anyone with the Time Stone can do this, or is it just because Strange is such a powerful sorcerer that he was able to manipulate the Time Stone to make this work? I guess now we'll never know. And with the Time Stone destroyed, it seems like Strange has lost his ability to become universally aware, right? Well, not so fast. I think that the third eye that we saw, okay, what's the word I want to use here? Sprout? Grow, unleash at the end of Multiverse of Madness will help open Strange's senses and help him become universally aware. At least I hope so. I don't know, I still find that ending sort of weird where the actual movie ends with a fun smash cut of something dark and foreboding, with Strange kneeling over in pain and the eye opening, and then the mid-credit scene just shows him walking around fine and seemingly mastered it. But maybe that's just me who has that problem. What do you guys think? Iron Man was absent from the MCU's version of the Illuminati, which does raise some questions. Does this universe not have an Iron Man or a Tony Stark? But then, who built the Ultron bots? In the scene where Strange meets the Illuminati, there is a 7th seat that's empty. The powers that be behind the movie have played coy about who it could be, but again, with the Ultron bots around and the fact that Tony Stark is arguably one of the most important members of the Illuminati in the comics, I think the seat could have belonged to him. Maybe their version of Tony still perished while fighting Thanos? Or maybe he just had some errands to run that day. The only thing working against Tony being in the Illuminati in that universe is that the 7th seat is at the very end, and I don't think any version of Tony Stark would be okay with seating at the end of the council rather than in the middle. You know, ego.
Yeah.
But anyways, the hidden power I wanted to highlight from Tony Stark is his Technopath ability. Now, Tony has always had an interesting relationship with machines, but there's been a few times in the comics where he could actually control machines himself. The biggest example is when he had the Extremis upgrade, but there have been some other times as well. I think if Tony was alive in our universe, then the next step for him after his nanobot upgrade would have been controlling all sorts of machines with his mind. If that 7th seat wasn't for Iron Man, then the other big option could have been Namor. Namor is sometimes a hero, sometimes a villain, sometimes an anti-hero who was in the original Illuminati. Notably, Namor was the only one who didn't vote to banish Hulk from our planet at the start of the Planet Hulk storyline. And while this ability isn't exactly the most hidden out of all of them, I really wanted to mention his ability to fly. I've always found that a little crazy. Namor is an Atlantean who totally excels underwater, but you're telling me the wings on his feet also allow him to fly around? In the comics, this is explained with Namor being a hybrid Atlantean and a mutant, with his mutant side allowing him to fly, which I guess makes sense. One of the biggest surprises about the Illuminati scene in the MCU was the inclusion of Captain Marvel. The hero isn't normally associated with the secretive group, but it makes sense they would want to recruit her. She has close ties with both the Earth government as well as galactic connections all across the universe, which surprisingly not a lot of heroes have. She's also one of the most powerful heroes ever, and any group would want such a powerhouse on their side. Of course, the MCU didn't have Carol Danvers, but rather Maria Rambeau as Captain Marvel, which was a fun change of pace. You know, until she was crushed by that statue. Anyways, one ability that Captain Marvel has that she rarely uses is her shapeshifting ability. We've seen her in the comics shapeshifts between human and Kree, which is a fascinating development that I hope the MCU utilizes in the future. A different version of Baron Mordo popped up in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness to basically confirm that, yep, most versions of Mordo will be evil in some way and eventually hate Doctor Strange. I guess it's destiny or fate or whatever. Anyways, I hope that Baron Mordo Prime gets the spotlight in the inevitable Doctor Strange 3 because we technically haven't seen what he's been up to since he robbed Benjamin Bratt of his magic and swore to get rid of all the sorcerers everywhere. So whenever we do see him again, I hope he comes ready to battle. well. A part of me hopes he ups his necromancy game a bit. In the comics, Mordo dabbles with the evil book of Cagliostro and gets some nifty power upgrades, one of them being necromancy. It would be an interesting story to see Mordo try to seek out the book of Cagliostro, much like the alternate Strange did in the What If episode, and then use the book to try to destroy all magic everywhere. Sure, I understand the irony of trying to use magic to destroy other magic, but Mordo now seems like the type of character who wouldn't mind the cost if it meant accomplishing his goals. Captain America was on the Illuminati briefly, but it didn't last too long. Already being hesitant with what the Illuminati stood for, there came a time where he disagreed with the group's course of action, so they kicked him out. But not before they erased his memory so he forgot he was ever part of that group, of course. But he was still a member, so I wanted to include him on this list. But the tricky part is finding a hidden power that you may not know about. Like, I could tell you that Steve Rogers is actually a pretty good artist, but that doesn't help in the fight against evil. So I'm gonna go with his ability to be hypnosis resistant. Yeah, thanks to the super soldier serum, his brain is a bit harder to hypnotize and control than that of an average fleshy normal human. Black Panther is another member who has only dabbled with the Illuminati. He was actually asked by Iron Man at the very beginning when the group formed, but T'Challa declined because he didn't believe a group should operate that way. Well, he was probably right in the long run. Anyways, what hidden powers does the Black Panther have? Well, I think one of the coolest is the Black Panther knowledge. This allows anyone who is the Black Panther to access all the information that any other previous Black Panther had, making them a legit hive mind of information. I bring this one up because as of this video, it's still unclear how they're going to work in T'Challa's demise in the MCU. But now that Shuri is taking over as the Black Panther, it would be cool for her to somehow receive information and guidance from her past ancestors, or even T'Challa himself. Difficult to pull off and an overall tricky situation? Yeah, but there might be a way to achieve it without being disrespectful. I'm going to spend the back section of this video looking at other powers the characters I've already mentioned have. What can I say? Sometimes superheroes have a lot of hidden abilities. Anyways, I wanted to restart with Professor X. Did you know that Charles Xavier is extremely proficient in martial arts and hand-to-hand combat? That's something I wouldn't expect. There's a version of Professor X who learned how to fight and served in the military where he was part of certain search and rescue missions. So I'm just saying, if you find a way to get past Professor X's psychic attacks, don't expect him to just be a fragile old man in a wheelchair. He could probably still knock your teeth out. Did I put Blackagar Boltagon twice on this list because I like saying Blackagar Boltagon's name? What? That's crazy talk. I wouldn't just put Blackagar Boltagon on this list just so I have an excuse to keep saying Blackagar Boltagon in this VO. That would be crazy. Anyways, Blackagar Boltagon, aka Black Bolt, is mainly known for his voice, but what happens when he only wants to do a little bit of damage as opposed to destroying entire civilizations? Well, that's where his fighting prowess comes into play. Black Bolt has something called the Master Blow, which is a huge punch that the Inhuman King recharges and uses when necessary. We first saw him use it against the Thing in his first ever appearance, and although it didn't quite knock the Thing out, it definitely hurt him and almost made him pass out. Any attack that can do that to the Thing deserves special recognition.
Hey, you.
When you're the Sorcerer Supreme, chances are you're going to be susceptible to attack at any possible moment. And being so powerful, you have to assume that the enemies who target Stephen Strange want to attack him at the best time in order to increase the odds of success. Well, if you're a bad guy, you might think that attacking Doctor Strange while he's sleeping is your best bet. I mean, after all, why wouldn't you? If he's asleep, he can't cast spells, right? Well, wrong. Turns out that Doctor Strange realized how vulnerable he could be while asleep, so he decided to create a sleep protection spell around himself. So whenever he dozes off, he's protected. This would certainly help any superhero get a good night's sleep, don't you think? Alright, the MCU is all about cheer-worthy theater moments, so I want to paint a picture for you. Imagine that we see John Krasinski's Reed Richards show up and we all cheer. And just when we think the time for cheering is over, we see that this version of Reed Richards is actually the ultimate version of Reed, who turns into the villain called the Maker and reveals he has a Venom symbiote infused with his body.
That's better.
Yes, there was a time in the comics where the evil version of Reed merged with a piece of the Venom symbiote. He had successfully kept this hidden from Eddie Brock until it was too late, so I count that as a hidden power. We will never get to see T'Challa in live action showcase some of Black Panther's more unique powers, which is overall tragic. The character has been around for so long in the comics that he's been through phases of strange powers and abilities that ebb and flow as time goes on. One of the most interesting had to be the time where T'Challa gained some clairvoyance.
And as you can see,
He once developed the ability to see the future and was actually having bad nightmares about things that were yet to come. Yes, this power went away rather quickly, but it would be cool to see in live action. Who knows, maybe Shuri will somehow inherit this ability. Do you think the Illuminati deserve another shot in the MCU? If so, who would you put on the team? There's a lot of options out there, and hopefully they do better than the Illuminati of Earth 838. But I guess that's not a high bar to clear. Anyways, let me know in the comments.